everyone for joining us today. I do have a few housekeeping items that I'm going to go ahead and go over with you. First and foremost, we are recording today's session, so please keep that in mind. Also, due to the number of participants today, we've automatically muted your phones to eliminate any interferences. Please enter any questions or comments into the chat box. If you have something to add to the conversation, please note it in the chat box and we will call on you. You may also send questions through email to professional@asce.org. Also, please turn off your video to avoid sharing your video with the group or being captured in the recording. And please close all other applications, especially email, so that our system and your system will run smoothly. And then lastly, please keep all conversations geared towards the benefit of the community and today's topic. So with that, we will begin today's roundtable with introductions from our panelists. Then each panelist will share their perspective and insights on the topic of building and maintaining professional relationships with coworkers. So the panelists will also respond to any questions from the audience. We have a great team of panelists today, so please take advantage of their expertise and ask as many questions as possible. We really want you to take advantage of the panel that we put together for you. So now it's my pleasure to welcome our panelists. I will start off with Ramsey. Ramsey, can you go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Hi, my name is Ramsey Awad, and I'm the Director of Public Works for the beautiful city of Rancho Palos Verdes in California. I've spent most of my career in local government. I've worked in smaller organizations as well as in larger ones, and I've been in a leadership role for most of my career, leading teams of 7 to 75. So I'll offer insights on developing relationships both as a frontline employee, as well as a supervisor, middle manager, and as a department head. And I'll comment on relationships within a department as well as across departments as well. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to hearing your perspectives. And now, Hannah, I'll turn to Hannah next. Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Hannah Costello. I'm a structural engineering staff consultant at Civil and Environmental Consultants in Bridgeport, West Virginia. I am a recent graduate of Fairmont State University. I've only been out for a little over a year now, so I'm hoping to bring a perspective of an entry-level engineer to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Next, I'll go ahead and turn to Julie. Julie, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Julie Seacrest, and I am the Director of Civil Engineering and Land Entitlement for Meritage, which is a private land developer. However, I just started in this new role, and my background is actually on the design side, private site development, any type of project. So I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I've been very involved with ASCE my entire career, and I'm currently the president-elect for the Georgia section. So I'm happy to be here today and looking forward to the discussion as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. And now, Heidi, could you go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Yes, so I am in the site development side in design. I actually currently am living in Puebla, Mexico, because I'm working on my master's degree here. But I'm still working part-time also for Wallace Engineering Structural Consultants in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Heidi. So I'll go ahead and start off with our kickoff question. But again, just to remind everyone, please go ahead and utilize the chat box to ask any questions. Really looking forward to hearing what you all think and what you'd like to hear discussed today. So to start off with our kickoff question, according to Gallup, people who have a best friend at work are 7 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. Additionally, good work relationships are linked to positive work outcomes. How have you been able to develop professional relationships with coworkers? So I'll go ahead and turn to Ramsey first. Can I go ahead and ask you?
Yeah, so I've relied on what I call the first 5 and the last 5, which is the first 5 minutes before a meeting starts and the last 5 minutes after a meeting wraps up. I find that it's really a good time to talk with coworkers in a less formal atmosphere. People tend to be a little bit more relaxed. The conversation flows a little bit more. And I also find it to be a good time to talk about non-work related things. Did you catch the game over the weekend and that type of thing? And I think that just sort of helps build the relationship. And it's also a time for me to talk about some work-related items as well, but it's in a more relaxed environment where the conversation can just be a little bit more direct and honest sometimes. So I found that is a good way to connect with people. And I also find when I run into coworkers grabbing a sandwich at the deli to be a good time to chat as well. And that helps, in my opinion, to build the relationship, get to know each other a little bit better, which ultimately I think translates to building a good working relationship. Sometimes I'll schedule lunches and go to a nearby restaurant and grab lunch, which is really a good time to talk about non-work related things as well as work related things. And again, just helps build the relationship.
Absolutely. Those are some great ideas. I like that the first 5 and the last 5. I'm like taking notes over here. Hannah, I'll turn to you next. How have you developed professional relationships?
Yeah, to play off what Ramsey said, I think it's important to get out of the strict business mentality whenever you're having conversations with coworkers. I like to take advantage of standing around the printer, the proverbial water cooler talk, take advantage of that time to see how their day's going, ask about, did you catch the latest game, how the weather's going, and then maybe turn that into, hey, we need to catch lunch sometime, or I heard you have a strenuous project going on. I'd like to learn more about that, especially on an entry level, any chance to pick their brain. I find that a lot of more senior personnel really appreciate your interest and your drive to learn more. So I think that's a great way to build that relationship and to build credibility with that person.
Yeah, those are some great ideas. Julie, I'll turn to you next. What are some of the things that you've done to build professional relationships?
So I think, those, ideas that have already been brought up are great. And I've definitely done that as well. I think building the personal connection of, outside of work is really important, and lunches are great. Happy hours are great. Any other activity where it's relaxed and you're not necessarily talking about work. I also think that building the professional trust is really important too. I think it goes hand in hand. So anytime you can show that you're looking out for them, maybe it seems maybe on a personal level, but giving them a heads up on something, or even professional activities that are coming, letting them know, getting them involved in ASCE. So I think outside of work is very important, but also kind of forming a personal work relationship at the same time.
No, that's absolutely a great idea. I know, sharing articles too sometimes is seeing something and saying, hey, I think you would really appreciate that, like is also kind of a cool idea. But Heidi, I'll hopefully that wasn't what you were going to say, Heidi, because I'll turn to you next.
So I was going to say one of the most simple ways that I've developed relationships with my best friends at work is being intentional about getting to know them. So there's a group of us that try and eat lunch together once a week. We take periodic breaks at our desk just for a few minutes. And that may seem like a waste of time to some people, but I think in the long run, it makes us more efficient and more motivated to be at our jobs when we like the people. So it's really important for your coworkers to feel seen and appreciated. So one way that I've tried to do that is combining my love of banking for all the birthdays in the civil department at our headquarters. Little things like that, just taking me a few minutes to handwrite a thank you note to a coworker that helped you out with a project or did some people here make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Heidi, I know you were breaking up a little bit, but I think we got most of what you were saying. I know you shared that before as far as baking, for birthdays and whatnot. And that's just, I love that idea. Sometimes it's like that personal touch that really is so important. So, but here's a great follow-up question to that in the chat. How personal should I be at work, i.e. religion, family, personal, travel, vacation? Are there limits to that? Julie, you're shaking your head. Do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great idea or a great question. There can be kind of a hazy line there, I think, once you do start building the relationship outside of work, how much do you share? And I think it's probably different for every one of those work relationships. You obviously want to be comfortable yourself, and you want the other person to be comfortable as far as how personal you get with the information that you talk about. So unfortunately, I don't think that there's a really great, talk about this, but not that. I think you just have to kind of feel out the relationship and just make sure that you feel comfortable and that the other person feels comfortable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ramsey, do you have anything to add to that from kind of more of a supervisory level?
Yeah, I think Julie said it very well. My personal take on this is that I think it's okay to say something like, we went camping over the weekend and it was great, had a lot of fun. I don't like to disclose too much detail personally. I think, as Julie said, there is a line, and so that's just where I personally fall on that. And it is a bit different with an employee supervisor relationship than with a coworker relationship. So that factors into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point to make. I like this note in the chat here that Heidi also makes little animals and artwork gifts for people, and that people love to receive them. That's such a fun, cute thing to do. You don't have any with you, do you, Heidi? Uh-oh, you're on mute.
No, I don't have anything handy right now. I think it's all upstairs.
Okay. All right, awesome. So the next question, very practical, something that I think everyone is thinking about these days. How has the increased shift to virtual meetings and working at a distance affected how you build and maintain your professional relationships with your coworkers? Many of the initial ideas and examples shared were very focused on in-person contact. So, Heidi, I know, you're virtual right now, right?
Yes. So I think one thing that's important is just like in person, that it's important to grab lunch or do something that's not purely work related. At the beginning of the pandemic, when our entire team was remote, we would have some like happy hour calls with the group of people that we normally would hang out with at the office. And I think one unforeseen benefit of that was that we also got to kind of spend time with each other's families in a way. So like, I know my mentor's son and daughter that are preschool aged would jump on and ask if they could say hi to dad's friends. And so that was just kind of a fun personal touch to something that was otherwise kind of isolating.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hannah, you are in the office, right? Are you doing any time remotely?
We were remote for a very short period of time last March and April, but we've mostly been in the office, so I really didn't have much experience with this side of things, so I'm not really sure how much I could add to that. I do know when that short period of time when we were remote, my supervisor in the transportation structural group always ensured that we had a team meeting every morning just to check in on everyone and make sure they didn't need any help, that they weren't struggling in any way, that they were getting what they needed, everyone was on task. And I think that that was very valuable to kind of make sure that the whole team was in touch with each other and on task.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, this have been some really isolating times, so it's really just so important to support one another. Ramsey, what about you and your team? What are some of the things that you've done? Are you virtual at all?
So right now I'm a mix, but for the past year, most of the time I've been virtual, and I learned a couple of techniques from some coworkers, from a former boss of mine. He scheduled an end of the week, Friday, 4:30 call with his team. and he designed it to be a how did the week go? And so often that conversation starts with the key projects and things like that, but then it goes from there to a bit less work related. And it's a good time to reestablish that connection. And so I think that was a really good technique. Also, I found that some of my teams were also setting up their own little group connection times as well. And then finally, I've tried to find time to just drop in and look if somebody's got 15 minutes available and just do a quick call, informal, unscheduled, and drop in and just say, hey, how are things going? And I found that to be helpful to kind of keep the connection going as well.
Absolutely, that's some great advice. Julie, did you have anything to add?
Yeah. So what I've done with my teams is have a daily call, very quick, 30 minutes or less. That is a way to catch up on anything that we need to project related. But we also end up, just checking in really briefly while everybody's on the call together. And I think that has gone a long way for keeping everyone, connected while we're remote. And the other thing, which I think, it's a little less formal, but we also have group texts set up with each team. And that, again, can be project related, things like that we need to talk about. But we also end up sending memes to each other and, jokes go back and forth. And, so that kind of is a really light way to stay in touch that I think has been really helpful and beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I really like that idea, kind of, that personal touch. So I also love this question in the chat box, very practical. Here's a random specific question. If I ask an older colleague out to lunch to talk about their career, should I pay? My guess is they will insist on paying. Ramsey, I'm gonna ask you because you're probably in that supervisor role, right? Like someone would ask you out to lunch. What's your experience?
Yeah, no, I don't think you should pay. The supervisor may or may not offer to pay. And so I think it'll depend on the situation. I also think that I'll just also mention that that type of conversation doesn't have to be over lunch. So if you want to avoid the awkwardness of that component, I think good managers, or in my opinion, I would hope that good managers would make the time to sit down and have a conversation with an employee about their career goals and their thoughts on that. And I personally actually like to do it in the office where I can jot down some notes as well, although I can see the benefit of an informal setting.
Absolutely. Hannah, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think I kind of disagree a little bit on that one. I think that I would offer to pay for lunch, but I wouldn't push it. I see it more as a way of, I'm grateful for your time, thank you. And I don't think that, if they disagree with, they don't want you to pay, I don't think you should push it. I think that the point is to get across your gratitude for their time and for them to discuss that with you. And I guess for me, I do like that more comfortable out of the office, let's get away from everything setting. So kind of a different perspective. I don't think it hurts to offer, but I think the point is to get across that gratitude for their time.
Yeah, that's a great thing to consider. Yeah, it goes both ways, right? Like it's funny because Ramsey, you're probably assuming that you're going to pay, right? And then, but it's like a 50-50, like everybody's got to come together. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think Hannah's made some really good points, and I agree with what she said.
Yeah, that's awesome. So here's another good question. What about finding your colleagues' interests and finding a level ground where they can connect with your own interests? So as far as, I guess, connecting with people around interests, what are some of the things that that you all are doing? Heidi, do you want to weigh in on that? It sounds like you connect with a lot of people with different interests.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool, just checking. Yeah, so I think for me, I'm very passionate about finding those connection points with people, whether it's interests or sharing funny stories about like kid quotes or something. Like there's something you have in common with everyone. So one thing that I've done is like once I started my watercolor journey, I like to share that with people at work. And that led to us putting up some like stands for people to display their art on at the office. And so it was just really interesting. There were some people that shared things that I never would have known had an interest in that kind of art and creativity. So I think that's something that's really cool, is like be open and vulnerable about like your interests and what you like, and that might spark conversations with people that you wouldn't have expected.
Absolutely. Julie, did you have anything to add?
I think that the most important way, or maybe the quickest way to finding out others' interests, are just asking questions, which, could seem kind of obvious, but I know that us as engineers, sometimes we feel like we want to hold back conversation, or, we're not really sure what questions to ask. But I would just say, not to put too much pressure on it, and just ask anything that you would feel comfortable answering yourself. And, like Heidi mentioned, I think if you share something, then someone else is going to be more likely to share something too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice, is to kind of put yourself in that person's shoes, right? Awesome. Great questions in the chat. Please continue to ask them. I think this topic is one that really lends itself to personal situations. So that's great that there's been so many great questions. We've got another one here. How have you approached building and maintaining? Well, we've already talked about this one. I'll skip that one. So where do you draw the line for professional relationships with coworkers? We've talked about that a little bit, but this goes on a little bit more specifically. Is it a good idea to connect on social media or other social events outside of work? Ramsey, can I turn to you on this one first?
Sure. I personally like to have some separation between work and personal life. So I personally don't connect on social media with coworkers. That's just sort of my take on it. And just my personality type, I don't engage as much in the social activities with coworkers. But I've seen other coworkers that do, and I think it can be very beneficial to working relationships. For example, I'm familiar at one of my prior employers with a group that played volleyball at lunch every other day, and that was a great way to connect. And so, for people that are comfortable and enjoy doing those types of things, I think they can be really beneficial to building relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Heidi, what are your thoughts?
So I think the social media aspect is a little bit tricky. I would say that if you add your coworkers on social media, your posts need to be appropriate if anyone at your office were to see them. I personally do have some social media connections with coworkers, but I have no issue if they were to say, show my boss my Facebook page. I also think that I tend to be friends on social media with people that I would be friends with in life in general. So I never feel pressured to accept a request. I think it's okay to set your boundaries. And then one of my mentors always says that we spend more waking hours with each other than with our family members, and it's important to like who you work with. So there's some of us that periodically go out after work or have game nights. A few of us have been to each other's homes to hang out. So I think it's all in feeling out what's appropriate. Don't assume that any of that is okay with your coworkers. You guys need to find that balance within what your company culture kind of supports.
Yeah, absolutely. Julie, what are your thoughts?
I treat this differently, for different people. And I think it's part of getting to know our coworkers on that personal level. And I typically don't send out requests to anyone myself, but if I do receive one, I will probably wait until I feel comfortable, like we do have that personal relationship. And again, it's not like I'm posting anything that I wouldn't want anyone to see, but it's just that kind of boundary set. But with that being said, I do have a lot of coworkers, past and present, that I am connected to on social media. But it took time and just kind of feeling out those relationships first.
Absolutely. So there's a great comment here from past AC President Guna. Guna, welcome. Thanks for joining us. It's always great to have you. He says, don't discuss politics with coworkers. So that's one of those things that, sometimes if you're going to put politics on your social media feed, maybe don't friend coworkers, right? But that again is certain people do go into politics and certain people don't, right? I'll go ahead and turn to the next question. But again, if anyone has any other questions, please go ahead and share them there. This is kind of an interesting question. How do you handle, and this actually piggybacks very well on the politics question. How do you handle difficult work relationships with a team member? What tips do you have for working with someone you don't get along with? So Hannah, I'll turn to you first. Have you ever encountered a difficult situation?
Yeah, I think that the importance with this is at this point, if you realize that you're not going to get along with the coworker, you're not trying to build a friendship with them at this point. You're just strictly getting the job done, and you just need to ensure that you're respecting them as a professional, but you also need to ensure that you're getting that respect back. I believe in the power of having adult grown-up conversations, but that doesn't always work, and you may have to get a third party involved. But I do think that most of the time it can be worked out. And just, if you're not going to be friends at lunch and personal life, then just keep it strict and professional. Get the job done, because everyone's at work to get a job done and provide clients the best materials you can, and move on.
Yeah, that's great advice. Ramsey, I'll turn to you, because I know you've probably managed people that have had some difficulties getting along.
Yeah, and Hannah made some great points. I'll add to that I what I like to try to do is find some common ground, and there almost is always some common ground to start building from. And finding that common ground and building from that common ground, I think, is a good way to start to build a professional working relationship where you can get things done, as Hannah said. A couple other components that I think are important is transparency. I try to make sure that I'm very transparent. I think that helps establish some trust, even if it can be a little bit uncomfortable. So sometimes I may say, I'm worried about X, Y, and I'm worried about missing the deadline if we go with this approach or something like that. And that may come off as a bit of a criticism, but I think said properly and said in a transparent way, it can get the conversation started about strategy or direction. And the other piece is listening to. I think in challenging work relationships, you have to make even more of an effort and try even harder to listen, and just be very deliberate about listening, and really try to understand where the other person is coming from, and try to build off of that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Listening is so important. Julie, did you have anything to add?
And Hannah kind of mentioned this, but I think communication is really important, obviously, and just having that open conversation, if something comes up, is very important. And if you have to be the one to extend that olive branch first, and be the bigger person, so to speak, to try to move past whatever it was that happened, and form that connection, while also not taking things too personally, because everybody's going through different things that we don't know about as much as we are trying to build these personal relationships at work. So not taking those things personally, and then talking to the person about it, having an open conversation and trying to mend it, but also not getting too invested in this has to be mended, but how do we just move forward in a peaceful way that isn't gonna mess up the office politics or anything else. And I also think getting a third party involved after that discussion, if that just goes south and you need some help with it, I think asking a supervisor to get involved on an unbiased level, and having an open conversation, again, maybe going through both sides whatever it is in an equal way. But I think, the biggest part of that is just communication and not taking things personally.
Yeah, and that's hard to do, right? It's so easy to take things personally. Awesome. So I'll go ahead and turn to our next question. What recommendations do you have for developing good relationships with executives or C-suite staff? Hannah, I'll go ahead and turn to you first for this one.
This one for me, from my standing in my career right now as an entry level, I think it's important to not be afraid to get into the conversation. I think that a lot of times when people are new to the industry and stuff, they're afraid to give their opinion or ask questions to people in these powerful positions, for lack of better words. It can be intimidating. I think that you just have to remember they put their pants on the same way you do every morning, and they're people. They're there. Usually they actually want to help younger staff. They really do. There's people out there that want to mentor and want to see someone that has drive and ambition. So don't be afraid to ask questions and provide opinions and get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. Ramsey, I'll go ahead and turn to you next.
Yeah, one thing I've learned over my career is that usually executive level staff are very busy. And so I think one way of building a good relationship is reading the body language and understanding when they are really busy. Be very summary level in how you deliver information, bottom line, get to the bottom line quickly. I think they appreciate when you're efficient with their time, and that helps you get more time with them and ultimately continue to build that relationship. And I do think also that the executive level staff, they're also people too. They have weekends, they watch ball games, they do fun stuff as well. And just finding the right time, again, going back to reading the body language, finding the right time to talk about those things, I think is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points. Julie, did you have anything to add?
I think the only other thing I would add would just be asking their advice on things. I think Heidi or Hannah may have mentioned this earlier, but most supervisory level people do want to mentor and help, and they want to see you succeed. So taking the cues and not asking them when they're hair's on fire, super busy for advice, but if you can ask their advice at a calm time, most are going to be willing and want to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up some great points as far as like building your relationship with your boss too, as far as, not necessarily even your boss, but I think that's another great question to talk about is, trying to build off of their cues as far as how they want to be communicated with and, being sensitive to their schedule. So that's all really interesting things to think about. I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. What types of social activities or events has your organization organized to help employees develop and maintain professional relationships with coworkers? Heidi, I'll go ahead and turn to you first. It sounds you've already mentioned some of the things that you guys have done.
I have. So I think our company, first of all, has just done a really great job of encouraging connections and valuing employees as whole people, not just as part of a machine to get projects done. As a few examples, every summer we have an intern happy hour at our office where we get together and hang out with our summer interns. And when I was an intern, I had a really lovely conversation with our founder during that event. And then we also have birthday celebrations every 3 months where the office orders cupcakes or an ice cream truck comes, and anyone with a birthday within those 3 months gets to get their treats first. And we spend an hour or so mingling and hanging out and just chatting. And then our department also has an end of the year party most years where we have a game night or go bowling or something along those lines. We also have an annual company anniversary party and an annual open house where hundreds of guests from industry come to our office. COVID obviously made that a little different this year. And then on top of those events, we also have charity fundraising lunch and service opportunities. And so each of those events offers the opportunity to spend time with our coworkers outside of project meetings and discussions.
Those are all great things. I like the ice cream truck idea. I want some, you could send ice cream to all the employees at home, right? Like that's something that you could probably do. Hannah, I'll turn to you next. What are some of the things that that your company's done?
My company, CEC, is very employee oriented. I'm very thankful for that. One thing we always usually do is a summer cookout in our parking lot where everyone just brings all kinds of food. We have chili cook-offs, barbecue cook-offs, all kinds of good stuff. And actually, an interesting story related to this on just how much our company cares about our employees. I recently got married in September, and my husband actually works for the same company. And due to COVID, we had to cancel our wedding shower. And our office lead would recognize this, and a bunch of people got together and surprised us with a socially distanced office wedding shower. And everyone was in on it. Everyone knew except for us, and so it's just this really special thing. And we're not the only people that they've done things like that. There's been baby showers they've hosted and just allowed people to use like the office building and stuff for personal things like that. And they just genuinely care, and I think that helps. Knowing that that's ingrained in the company really allows you to continue to build those relationships and encourages it, and you want to be able to help and give back to your coworkers. So it's really awesome.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize that your husband worked with you.
He does. We started interning here together when we were in college. So.
And you met during Concrete Canoe, is that right?
We did. He was a year older than me, and my first weekend on campus, I went to the Concrete Canoe table with all the organizations there, and that's where we met, and the rest is history. So, Fairmont State ASC, love stories.
That is so fantastic. I love it. I love that
And
story.
we're not the only marriage to come out of Fairmont State ASC, so great matchmaking. You should put that in ASC's mission.
Matchmaking.
Yeah.
I know, I love it. I think, we were just talking the other day, and it's like there's so many ASC members that actually have met through ASCE and have gotten married, and I think it'd be fun to do like a fun like collage, of all the different couples.
That would be awesome.
I think that would be fun. Anyways, that's on my to-do list. I'll put it together. Sorry, that was definitely building some professional relationships, right? Julie, I'll turn to you next. I forget what the question was now. What are some fun events that your company has done to build relationships?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because everything is pre-COVID, but we would have beer and wing Fridays once a month. We'd have happy hours with each team, field day once a year, holiday party, all that kind of stuff. Now that we are in COVID, we do have company-wide get-togethers that are virtual, when everybody's got, a drink, and sometimes we wear costumes just to kind of shake it up. But hopefully we'll, all be moving back into, non-virtual things coming up, maybe sometime this year, because those are always better.
Always better in person, right?
Yep.
It's been a rough year overall, but I'll go ahead and turn to, another question about, the rough year and how unconventional things have been. What are some of the unconventional ways you've been able to develop or foster relationships with coworkers during the pandemic? Heidi, I'll turn to you first. Do you have some unconventional things you've done?
I'm trying to think.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Does anyone?
No, you're good. You're good. So I think the most fun thing we did was during when we would normally have done our lunches together, we had virtual lunch together a few times. And so everyone was sitting on their back porch enjoying the the weather this summer while we were working virtually and just chatting, which was probably the most normal that it felt to interact with coworkers while we were all working virtually. It's a little awkward to like sit in front of your computer and eat on camera, but we would have been in person anyways. So I think that was probably the most different thing that we did.
Yeah, I think that's fun. I've heard of other people doing it, so you're not alone. Julie, did you have anything unconventional that you've done throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, I think I already mentioned this, and it seems very simple, but it's actually been pretty impactful. But just the group text messages, with different teams or different groups in the office, that's really gone a long way to be an informal way of staying in touch and sending each other, memes and jokes and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's fun. I know there's a few group chats that I'm part of that, those memes and jokes always kind of brighten your day when you need it the most. So, Ramsey, do you have any examples of unconventional things you all have done throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, not so much on the social side of it, but also just in terms of working together. We've tried to do a little bit more outside. We've got some picnic tables outside of our offices, and so sometimes it's slap a set of plans down on the picnic table, outside, put your masks on, and look over it. Also, more site visits and walks, going for a walk while we're talking about something. Of course, in sunny Southern California, we're able to do that a little bit more than maybe some other places that are having snow right now. But just trying to think creatively is what we've tried to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. So here's another question. How do you recommend maintaining relationships with coworkers after they leave the organization when your relationship was previously focused around work? Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I think one way would, sorry. Do you want to go ahead, Ramsey?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I think one way to, like, if you were coworkers, would be something like if there's, say, a women in design lunch coming up, shoot a text and be like, hey, since we don't see each other as often, would you like to be my +1 to this women in design event? Or, that kind of thing. Hey, there's an AIA design competition. Do you want to go check out the gallery after work together and see the entrance, or something like that, where you can kind of invite them into, even if it's still a professional sphere, and then maybe that develops into a non-work related relationship. But I think things like ASCE and AIA can really be a bridge to form between the two areas.
Absolutely. Ramsey, I'll let you go next.
Yeah, so I recently changed jobs about, I think, 4 or 5 months ago. And so this is what I'm experiencing right now. But, I just call and say, hey, how's it going? What's new? And I'll give my updates as well. I'll call and say, hey, here's what's going on, and that type of thing. And, certainly it's easier to do with folks that you've developed both a professional and some sort of personal relationship, which I think they do blend at some point. And so, sometimes what I've done is I've just called somebody and said, hey, I remember when you were telling me about how you were building your garage, and guess what? There's a guy down the street that I'm walking and seeing him building that garage, and it just reminded me of you. And hey, how's it going? What's going on? What's new? So those types of things I've used. I think I like to stay in touch. I think people like to hear what's happening and what's new with former coworkers. So I guess the bottom line for me is I don't think there's a specific reason, just stay in touch.
Yeah, that's absolutely great advice. Julie, do you have anything to share? I know you recently started a new position, right?
Yes, I did. And I've actually been more likely in the past I know we talked about social media earlier, but I've been more likely to connect with past coworkers on social media after making the move. I think that is a good way to stay in touch and kind of know what's going on in each other's lives. But since it's a past coworker, you don't get, the daily saying the things and, not having, the boundaries that you would if they were your current coworker. And then also on LinkedIn too is a great way to stay connected with past coworkers. And then too, like getting in person, if you can, getting together for drinks or lunch or dinner. I've definitely done that with past coworkers to keep those relationships going too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like why lose the good thing, right? If you form those relationships, you'd hate to just lose them for starting a new job. So here's another one. How would you recommend developing professional relationships with clients or vendors that you work with? Does your approach differ from coworkers? So, as far as managing different contracts, I'm trying to think, Julie, is this something that you could speak to, or?
Yeah, so for me, I do quite a bit of networking and business development type things. And honestly, I don't think it does change. I think the same ways that you would build relationships with your coworkers or teammates, I think it's the same as how you would build your relationship with your clients or potential clients. Again, staying in touch, getting in person outside the office if you can. Um, I think I really think it's the same.
Ramsey, did you have anything to add?
No, I agree with that. In local government, sometimes you do have to be careful around some specific rules with lunches and things like that. So you just have to keep that in mind. But no, I agree with largely. I agree with what Julie said.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, is that there are some regulations around some of that, right? Gotta be careful. Heidi, Hannah, did you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add is I completely agree. I guess the only real difference is you're not seeing these people every day like your coworkers, so the follow-up is so critical, I think, with these sort of things. Once you go out to lunch or something or see them at a convention, the follow-up is critical in these cases to maintain those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another great question in the chat. And maybe this is the question that we should have started off with, right? Why work to establish relationships with coworkers? What is the biggest reason? Heidi?
So I think I slightly touched on this earlier, but one of my mentors always says we spend more of our waking hours with our coworkers than we do with even our family members most of the time. And then for people like me who are single and live alone, I think it's even more critical because that is the majority of my social interaction on a weekday basis. So I think one of the biggest reasons is that I know for me, when I wake up in the morning, I'm excited to go to work and see how Tim's weekend was and how Nick's son is doing and what Alan's kids have said this week that was funny. And all of those kinds of things make me look forward to being there as much as getting to do engineering, which I also love doing. And I think for me, being in Mexico right now for grad school, I value even more those relationships that I've formed at work because I realize how much of an impact they make in my life when I'm not seeing them on a daily basis. And then I also think from a corporate standpoint, it's important for employee retention for people to like who they work with. If it's just a job, you'll easily job hop looking for the best project or the biggest salary or whatever. And if you have that personal human connection value, then you're forming a team of people who appreciate working in a team. And I think I've told people before, I would do a kind of engineering I like less to work with the people I like than I would prefer to do my dream job with people that I don't enjoy spending time with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great to keep in mind. Julie, you're nodding your head. Do you have anything to add?
No, I completely agree with everything Heidi said. I think, our own personal satisfaction at work for ourselves and our coworkers, I think it really does have a lot to do with those relationships that we have at work. And then, from the project side, I think it helps there as well because you're building trust and, you know that person will do, what, they can to help you, and vice versa. They know that they can trust you and that you're going to do what you can to help them too. So I think it's really important on a personal level of happiness and contentment at work, and then also just getting our jobs done as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ramsey, did you have anything to add? Ramsey or Hannah?
I think those ladies knocked it out of the park. I couldn't have said anything better than that. I think you should put them on a slogan or something. That was heartfelt and made me feel good.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So I think we probably have time for one more question. Want to talk a little bit about making friends and onboarding, if you will. Do you have team building ideas for remote work as you bring in new members of your team? Ramsey, do you have any ideas?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. So I had some recent experience with bringing in a couple of new team members in a larger organization of about 75 or so during during remote work. And so we had to be more deliberate about onboarding and building the relationships than we otherwise would have been. We deliberately scheduled small group sessions, 3 or 4 people with the new employee through Teams, and had a no agenda meeting to just ask everybody to talk about their background and talk about what, just what they've worked on, how long they've been there, what kinds of things they've worked on, and so it just became a very fluid conversation that was just genuine. And I think it helped the new employee feel more connected to the team, and it helped the team learn more about the new employee and just have that connection established more quickly than otherwise would have been the case in these circumstances. So I think the bottom line is just has to be done, I think, a little bit more deliberately in this environment than otherwise would be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Julie, I know, you've experienced this recently. Do you have any recommendations to share?
Yeah, I do. So I'm like 2.5 weeks in. So this is very fresh. I was pretty apprehensive about onboarding during this time. But my immediate team, even though they have been working at home for the most part, they actually are spending more time in the office right now with me, which I really appreciate. And we wear a mask and we stay socially distanced. And it won't, we won't be doing this forever. But for right now, that's what we're doing. And it's still not 40 hours. I don't think we'll ever all go back to 40 hours, but, that really helps. We've gone to lunch, actually. There's some places nearby that have outdoor seating, and so we can kind of spread out. So that's really helped. But that's just my immediate team. And then everybody else in the office, I haven't met most people. They're not there. So I've actually set up meetings, one-on-one virtual Zoom meetings with a lot of people, just 30 minutes just to get to know you. And it really is that, like, what area of town you live in, how long have you been here, what do you like to do for fun, and things like that. So it's actually, I think it's been an even faster process of getting to know most people because, typically I think it would have taken more time to actually get to some of those conversations with a lot of the people. So I think it's actually been great. And like I mentioned, I was pretty apprehensive about how it would go and how I would figure out who everybody was. So that's what I would recommend.
Absolutely. Hannah, Heidi, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say that with hang on. I need to switch.
Sorry, I keep unmuting on the wrong place. So I would just say with our summer interns, we sit in an open plan seating environment that's kind of divided into what we call quads, where there's kind of 4 to 8 people within a space, but we're 6 feet apart. And so most of us have been working remotely until the week that our intern was starting. So we tried to kind of coordinate with each other. I would kind of shoot out in our group message of our quad, hey, like, is someone going to be there today? Or do I need to come in this afternoon? What's everyone's plan, to make sure that she wasn't just sitting there alone with no one in our quad to mentor her. So in our quad, we have someone with she had about 6 months experience. I have about 5 years experience, someone's about 3 years experience, and like 10 to 11 years experience. So it was also, I think, good for her to have access to people at different levels of experience at different times, instead of it just automatically being whoever is either closest to her age or has the most experience. So I think she kind of developed a relationship with each of us, and then we were all in sometimes. But I think we had to be more intentional than normal about making sure that there was someone there to mentor her and kind of walk her through her tasks.
Yeah, being intentional is so important right now, like with pretty much like every aspect of your life too, not just work. Awesome. So we've got about 5 minutes left. So if I could ask each one of you to kind of, collect your thoughts and maybe share 30 seconds to a minute wrapping up, kind of what your final thoughts are on building and maintaining coworker relationships with your coworkers. Julie, did you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that the discussion has been really great today, and everybody has their different perspectives that they bring, which is great. But, I think building the connections with our coworkers is so important. And I think the bottom line is communication, getting personal, but not too personal, and, asking questions that you would feel comfortable yourself answering, and, making it a priority, because it does affect our lives so much, both actually at work and just, at home thinking about work. It can really impact that as well. But I've been happy to be here, and thanks for including me today.
No, thank you so much for joining us. You've really shared some great perspectives, and it's, been great to listen to some of the ideas that you have. Hannah, did you want to go ahead and share your final thoughts?
Sure. One thing that we didn't touch on that I wanted to mention is, do not fall into the trap of office gossip. That will get you nowhere fast. So I did want to mention that. Don't fall into that. And beyond that, I think my most important takeaway is to understand the person you're trying to build a relationship with boundaries, because they're different for everyone else. Each person has their own limit, and respect that. If that means they don't like to have social media with coworkers, don't push it. Respect whatever they want to talk about. If they don't like talking about family, don't talk about it. Just respect other people's boundaries, and that'll get you a long way with them. And I appreciate you having me on here, and it's been great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. It was great to have you.
Yes.
And those are some great points. Like, I can't believe that we didn't touch on office gossip or politics really at all. So that can be probably a whole nother discussion that we'll have to put together. Heidi, I'll let you share your final thoughts next.
Yeah, I think I would just say, be open to finding connections with coworkers in areas that you maybe wouldn't have expected to. So something I didn't mention is that one of our accountants, who's my mom's age, and I go kayaking together on the weekends. And so that's just, I never would have thought when I was starting in industry that would be the kind of thing I would find in common with someone, especially in a different department. And so just be open to finding fun connections with coworkers while respecting their boundaries.
That's great advice, and that's really what it's all about, right? Is having fun and enjoying what you do. Ramsey, I'll let you go ahead and close us out.
Yeah, thanks for including me. I heard some great things here today. I really appreciate it. I would just say, I think, listen, establish trust, and be transparent.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you. I love that. I'm gonna write a sentence and then share it out with everyone. I hope Susan wrote that down, and we can share it out. But that's like a great slogan that I think we can use going forward. So thank you again for all your great insights. I really enjoyed learning from you all today. This has been a great conversation. Just a reminder that ASC members can continue this conversation on ASC Collaborate at collaborate.asce.org. For those of you who are not yet members, I'd be happy to talk with you about the benefits and resources that ASCE provides. It doesn't always provide, marriage, but sometimes it does, as we've learned today. So that could possibly be a benefit. But seriously, if you do have any questions about ASCE and the benefits, please feel free to contact me directly. Thank you again to all of our panelists. I've really enjoyed today's session.